Good morning, everybody. Welcome to HBL. I'm going to continue on this lesson on Thai-Karen relations. So, in class, we learned about certain policies that hopefully promoted good Thai-Karen relations. And today we're going to look at the arguments that goes against this, and in some sense, the arguments that demonstrate that possibly there are tensions, possibly there are discriminations occurring within Thailand and between Thai and the Karen. So let's begin to look at these arguments. Now, the first point really is looking at social issues. And when we look at social issues, we can look at things like religion. All right. So differences in cultural and religious practices have sometimes led to tensions or conflicts between the Thai and the Karen. So, for example, over the construction of Buddhist temples or even the promotion of Thai cultural practices in predominantly Karen areas. And these have sparked certain controversies and even sparked certain protests because the Karen community obviously wants to preserve their cultural heritage. So for the Karen communities, basically, when you think about their religion, they practice indigenous religious practices, which includes possibly animism. Animism basically is sometimes is a practice that whereby they worship nature. Uh, but some of the Karen also could be converted to Christianity because missionaries will reach out to them in the past. And in some sense, because Thailand is obviously predominantly a Buddhist country, due to the differences in religion, there could be tensions. Now, one example that occurred was in 2018 when the Thai government proposed the construction of a Thai Buddhist temple in a Karen village. Okay, and of course, this proposal sparked significant oppositions and protests from the community. So when the Karen community feels that their practices or their culture is being affected, then tensions will increase. Now, another thing that we can think about social is in the area of education. So we look at religion, and now we're looking at education. Now, in Thailand, basically, the Thai language is often used in schools, right? And so one of the things that not done in Thailand, and the Karen community feels affected by it is because their language obviously is not being used actively in schools because a lot of the academic content is solely delivered through using the Thai language. So because of this lack of bilingual education, many of these students, the current students, may struggle in schools. And when you think about tests and examinations, they are also typically conducted in Thai. And so from the current community's point of view, it seems to suggest that our language is being sidelined. And when there is a rise of current nationalism, whereby they want to exert their cultural identity, then and when they feel that the language is not being used, then of course this will cause even further tensions and disputes. Now, let's move on to economic issues. And I think we're going to look at this idea of land issues, land ownership. Because obviously, land is important as, it will impact, what kind of economic activities can be conducted on the land. And traditionally, the current community, basically, they use the land for agriculture. Of course, we talk about cultural practices, but the land is used for agriculture, farming, and this impacts obviously their livelihood. However, one of the issues and tensions that emerge is when the Thai government wants some of this land to be designated as national parks or forest reserves, and so they want the land back, and this obviously impacts the current community. For example, one of the examples given here in the slides, you can see a village in the Ma Hong Song province, which have been sanctioned as ethnic tourism sites by the Thai government. And basically, the Karen lost their land. The state government reclaimed back this land through the forest department in October 2014. Then, in the process, if they sense that the Karen is not using the land legally, then or encroaching into state land, then because the Karen use it for logging, for cutting of trees to build a home, some of them could be convicted and then serve imprisonment. So again, you can see the tension occurring, and this in this case is the use of land in Thailand. Now, another economic issue that they face is in terms of course, jobs, workplace discrimination, which could hinder the current community's career advancement or even job satisfaction. Now, in Thailand, just like many countries, in order for you to work, you need to obviously be legally working in the country. And one way to do so is to obtain work permits. And Thailand has this national verification program to screen their migrant workers to certify their legal status. And in some sense, if you are legally here, then of course you can work. Unfortunately, some of the activists have argued that this so-called national verification program is slowly turning into a systemic corruption so-called process. And these activists argue that, with 1.7 million migrants, including the Karens, they need to compete through this process. They need to go through brokers, agencies, and officials. And of course, officials realize that everyone wants this permit, and so possibly corruption might take place. And this obviously makes the whole national verification program to be somewhat unfair. And of course, the Karen are then sucked into this so-called a systemic corruption process, which obviously is not good for the community. Now, then we move on to political. Now, many of the Karen communities have limited access to education and information about their political rights and their so-called rights to participate in elections. So because of the lack of awareness and education, this also might hinder their ability to want to participate effectively in politics and to obviously advocate their interests. So, when you, in a society when there's injustice, one way for you to get your so-called grievances being heard is obviously you go through the political process. But now, because the current community have limited access to this in some sense, and therefore their rights and their needs are not heard properly through formal channels or through the political process. And because of the lack of political representation to address some of the problems that they might face in the national platform, then what do you do then? Then, of course, you will then try to organize protests to bring attention to Thai society, even to the world, about their plights. So, for example, one significant demonstration that took place in 2012 when the Karen villagers traveled to Bangkok to protest outside the government office, demanding the return of their land and the recognition of their rights. So, going back to the land issue that we mentioned for economics. And despite all the protests that occurred, the government did not reverse their decision. So you can see the photograph over there. They say no right, no World Heritage Site. So I believe one of the incident was that this site that the current community was residing on was going to be designated a World Heritage Site. Okay, but of course, in the process, once it's designated a World Heritage Site, then the current has to leave the land, and basically they lost the rights to live in this land. So obviously they are not happy with the situation. Now, because their political rights are being hindered, then besides protesting, what complicates matter is that there is an armed group, armed organization in Myanmar to fight for so-called the rights of the Karen. So if some of them feel that they don't have enough rights, their community could be discriminated, then they might even join some of these so-called armed organizations. For example, like the Karen National Union. Though do take note that this union actually is in Myanmar, but of course, from the geography point of view, Myanmar and Thailand, they are in the same area, which is mainland Southeast Asia. Of course, some current communities, they will not join these armed organizations, but they will form their own organizations to sustain or to push for their rights in the community. So if you look at the slides here, you can see one organization is called the Karen Community Association, which works to promote Karen culture, language, and rights within Thailand, advocating for autonomy and recognition of the Karen identity. Then there's another organization known as the Karen Network for Culture and Environment, which focuses on environmental conservation and cultural preservation among the Karen communities in Thailand. So there are avenues for the Karens to voice their concerns, but do take note that the reason why they're turning to these so-called organizations because they feel that not many political leaders are speaking in Thailand to help fight for the Karen community. So let's pause here for a moment and reflect as we think through all that we have learned today. Do you think it's unfair to blame the Thai government for some of its failures to integrate the Karen community? Or is it just simply too complex? And maybe it might take a bit more time for the government to move slowly and gradually. So as we reflect on this, think about also all the positives that we talked about. Now, of course, we consider all the negatives. And then hopefully you can arrive at a balanced, a nuanced conclusion. All right. So thank you so much. As you continue your Microsoft Forms, please answer the MCQ questions, and that will be the end of the HPL. All right. Okay. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.